That night, Nora Hayes Pierce was thrown out of Magnolia House by her own husband in the cold rain, all because of a lie spoken through tear-filled eyes. The man who had once promised to protect her stood in the dining room with her suitcase in his hand, as if she were the intruder in his life. Her name was Nora Hayes Pierce, 35 years old. A woman who had once believed that love could soften the sharpest edges of a cold family, but inside the old Pierce family house in Savannah, love was not something given freely. It was measured. It was controlled. And sometimes, it was used as a trap. Magnolia House glowed with candlelight that evening. The cream-colored walls reflected the golden lamps, while the smell of roasted meat, wine, and gardenias blended together like a perfect painting. From the outside, the guests saw an elegant family drama story about an old family that knew how to preserve its family history. Inside, Nora knew the truth was very different. She was the one who had stayed awake through countless nights, choosing curtains, repairing each damp room, and replacing every dried flower arrangement with fresh blooms. She was the one who had used her own money to restore the greenhouse in the back, a place that had once been abandoned like an old scar. But when one guest raised a glass and praised Magnolia House for looking more beautiful than ever, Evelyn Pierce only smiled and said that the Pierce family had always known how to protect its legacy. Not once did she mention Nora. Evelyn was Adam's mother, Nora's mother-in-law, and the kind of toxic mother-in-law who could cut another person with a voice as soft as silk. She never shouted. She only looked at Nora as if she were a stain on a white tablecloth. To her, Nora was not a daughter-in-law. She was the woman who had entered the Pierce home after Adam's first wife left, an unwanted replacement. Lila Pierce entered the dining room later than everyone else. She was 22, beautiful, fragile, and knew exactly when to cry. She wore a pale blue dress that had once belonged to her own mother. She kissed Adam on the cheek, hugged Evelyn, then looked at Nora with a thin smile. "I thought tonight was a family dinner," Lila said softly, just loud enough for Nora to hear. "I did not realize outsiders were allowed to sit at the main table." Nora placed the napkin across her lap and kept her face calm. Adam heard it. He frowned, but said nothing. That silence was so familiar that Nora almost felt the pain before the real wound appeared. Dinner moved on through polite conversation. The guests talked about the history of the house, the old photographs of the Pierce family, and the sapphire brooch Evelyn always wore on important occasions. It was a piece passed down through generations, a symbol of status, of power, of everything Nora had never been allowed to touch. Then the brooch disappeared. Evelyn was the first to raise her hand to her collar. Her face froze. The entire dining room went silent. Even the sound of knives and forks touching plates came to a stop. "Where is it?" she asked. No one answered. Lila looked around, her lips trembling. "I do not want to say this, but I saw Nora go into your dressing room before dinner." The air in the room changed color. With one sentence, every eye turned toward Nora. Nora slowly stood up. "I did not take it." Evelyn let out a soft laugh, a laugh with no warmth in it at all. How strange. Whenever something goes missing in this house, the outsider is always the first person to claim she is innocent. Adam looked at Nora, not with the eyes of a husband searching for the truth, but with the eyes of a man too tired to stand against his own family. Then Lila cried. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a faint red mark on her wrist. She grabbed my arm in the hallway. "She told me to stop ruining your marriage." "I was scared, Dad." Nora felt the blood in her body turn cold. The truth was that Lila had been holding a glass of wine, ready to throw it at the wall where Adam's wedding photo with his former wife was hanging. Nora had only held her wrist to stop her, one brief touch, one action to keep something from shattering. But in toxic family relationships, the truth matters less than the person who tells the story first. Nora looked at Adam. She waited for him to ask. Just one question. "Is that true? What happened? Are you okay?" But Adam did not ask. He only exhaled, his voice low and heavy. "Nora, maybe you should leave tonight. Give everyone some time to calm down." The room seemed to tilt. Nora looked at the man she had loved, the man who had once fallen asleep on her shoulder after nights when Magnolia House was losing money, the man who had once said that without her, he would have sold the house long ago. Now he stood there, not as her husband, but as Evelyn's son and Lila's father, he had chosen. Nora spoke very softly. "You do not need time to calm down. You need an excuse not to protect me." Adam tightened his grip on the handle of her suitcase. "Do not make this worse." Lila hid behind Evelyn, but the corner of her mouth lifted for one quick second. Just a flicker. Enough for Nora to see it. Enough for her to understand that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a plan. Outside on the porch, the rain fell in silver threads beneath the light. Adam set the suitcase down beside Nora's feet. He did not look at her for long. "You should think about what kind of wife you want to become," he said. Nora looked at the oak door behind him, the door she had repainted with her own hands, the house she had once saved from decay, the family she had once tried to love with every last piece of patience she had left. Then the door closed, no shouting, no curses. Only the soft turn of the lock in the rainy night. Nora stood still on the steps, the hem of her evening dress slowly soaking through. Inside, the lights were still on. The sound of voices gradually returned, quieter, more false. A family continued its dinner after throwing her out of the very life she had helped them build. But what they did not know was that Mason Pierce, Adam's late father, had seen everything. He had seen who had truly kept Magnolia House standing. He had left a secret in the hands of a lawyer, and on the night Nora was treated like a woman with nothing, her real power was still resting quietly inside an unopened envelope. 3 weeks after the night she was locked outside the doors of Magnolia House, Nora no longer cried. What frightened her most was not losing her husband, losing her home, or losing the dining table where she had once tried so hard to belong. What chilled her was realizing that she had lived too long inside a family that needed only one lie to erase everything she had ever done. June Marlowe opened the door of her bakery close to midnight. She saw Nora standing under the awning, her evening dress soaked through, one hand pulling a small suitcase, her face pale as if she had just walked out of a burning house. June did not ask what had happened. Some friends understand that the first question should not be why. It should be, "Come inside." The room above the bakery was so small it could barely fit a single bed, an old wooden desk, and a low yellow lamp. But that first night there, Nora slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but she slept without hearing Lila's footsteps passing through the hallway, without wondering what cruel little remark Evelyn would leave behind at breakfast, without waiting for Adam to look at her with apologetic eyes, while still never standing on her side. In the morning, the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee rose from downstairs. Nora sat by the window, looking at the Savannah street still wet from the rain. She had once thought that losing Magnolia House meant losing everything, but as the light touched that small, unfamiliar room, she realized that some cramped places could let a person breathe more easily than a mansion filled with toxic family relationships. While Nora stayed silent, Lila began telling her version of the story online. She posted a photo of the Pierce family standing in front of Magnolia House, all three of them dressed beautifully, smiling as if they had never thrown anyone out into the rain. The caption spoke of a woman who had entered a family to steal its money, its name, and its family history. The comments came quickly. Some called Nora a gold digger. Some said Adam had finally come to his senses. Some pitied Lila for having to endure a cruel stepmother. A family story had been twisted into the perfect Reddit family drama story, where the liar cried first and the wounded person stayed silent, so silence became guilt. June read those words and grew red with anger. She wanted Nora to fight back. She wanted her to post the truth. She wanted her to let the whole city know who had really saved Magnolia House from decay. But Nora only saved every post, every image, every distorted sentence. She did not reply. Not because she was weak, but because she had learned that in family conflict stories, the person shouting the loudest was often not the one holding the strongest proof. On the 18th day, an unfamiliar call appeared on Nora's phone. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Grace Whitman, Mason Pierce's former lawyer. Her voice was calm, but there was a very long pause before she spoke again. "Mason left an envelope for you. He instructed me to call only when you were no longer allowed to step inside Magnolia House." Nora stood frozen in the middle of the small room. Mason's name felt like a key dropping onto the floor. Adam's father had passed away more than a year earlier. He had been the only person in the Pierce family who had ever asked Nora whether she was tired, the only one who had called the greenhouse in the back her work, not his family's. That afternoon, Nora went to Grace's office. Outside, the city was pale with soft sunlight, but inside her chest, something tightened in slow circles. Grace placed an old cream-colored envelope in front of her. Along the edge of the paper was Mason's signature, slightly shaky but clear. Inside was the amended will. Nora read every line, very slowly. Mason had left her a portion of ownership in Magnolia House, along with full management rights over the greenhouse and the profits generated from the activities she had built there. Not because she was Adam's wife. Not out of pity. But because Mason had clearly written that Nora was the person who had brought Magnolia House back from decline. Grace said Evelyn knew about it. She had objected. She had tried to delay it. After Mason died, the Pierce family never mentioned that will. Nora lifted her head. "So they did not think I was taking something from them. They knew they were keeping something that belonged to me." Grace did not answer right away. Her eyes were enough for Nora to understand. When Nora asked about the sapphire brooch, Grace stayed silent even longer. Then she opened another file. One of the Pierce family antiques had been taken for valuation a few days before the dinner. The person who signed the appointment slip was not Nora. It was Lila. The room suddenly became so quiet that Nora could hear the air conditioner running overhead. That night had not been a misunderstanding. It had not been the jealousy of a wounded daughter. It had been a trap. A hidden inheritance story had been buried beneath accusations, tears, and Adam's cowardly silence. That evening, Adam sent a message. "I think we should talk. I hope you have had time to think." Nora stared at the screen for a long time. A month earlier, those words might have hurt her. Now, they only showed her the distance between the man she had once loved and the man who had left her standing in the rain. She replied briefly that she would come to Magnolia House the next afternoon. Then, Nora took out 2 envelopes. One held the signed divorce papers. The other held a copy of Mason's will and the documents Grace had just given her. June stood in the doorway, watching her friend fold a deep blue coat over the chair. "Are you ready?" June asked. Nora touched the envelopes, her eyes no longer trembling. "No, but I am no longer going back to be forgiven." Outside, Savannah sank into twilight. And inside the small room above the bakery, the woman who had once been thrown away as if she had nothing finally knew she was holding the one thing the entire Pierce family feared most, the truth. The next afternoon, Nora Hayes Pierce returned to Magnolia House, not as a wife trying to find her way back home, but as the only person in that house who finally knew where the truth was hidden. Adam thought she had come to apologize. Evelyn thought she had come to negotiate. Lila thought she would tremble under the weight of their old stares. They were all wrong. The dining room looked exactly like it had on the night Nora was thrown out. The long walnut table, the high-backed chairs, the vase of white flowers in the center. Golden light covered everything with a false kind of warmth. But today, Nora looked at that room with different eyes. It was no longer a place where she had once tried to be accepted. It was only a beautiful room filled with too many lies. Adam stood near the window, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face tired. He had prepared a softer voice, just enough regret in his eyes, and the kind of opening line that belonged to a man who believed a woman could forget betrayal after hearing a few gentle words. "Nora," he said, "I think we all overreacted." Nora set her leather bag on a chair. No hurry, no trembling. She took out the first envelope and placed it on the table. Adam looked down. His expression tightened when he saw the words on the documents. Divorce papers. Lila let out a small laugh, but the sound broke in her throat. Evelyn sat straighter, her hand gripping the arm of her chair. Adam frowned. "You do not need to go this far." Nora looked at him. "You went this far first. "On the night you put my suitcase on the porch and locked the door behind me." The sentence landed on the table like something sharp. Adam tried to answer, but he could not find words clean enough to cover what had happened. Lila crossed her arms. She tried to hold on to that familiar look of contempt. "So you came back to play the victim?" Nora turned toward her. "No, I came back to end your performance." Lila went pale. Nora took out the second envelope. Thicker. Older. Along the edge of the paper was the seal of Grace Whitman's law office. The moment Evelyn saw it, the blood drained from her face. Other people might not have noticed, but Nora did. For the first time, her toxic mother-in-law had no polished sentence ready. Nora pushed the envelope toward Adam. "Your father left this for me, and your mother knew." Adam opened the documents. Lila stepped closer. Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. "Do not read that without the family lawyer present." Nora remained calm. "The family lawyer is the one who gave it to me." Adam read every line. The room became so quiet that the old clock in the hallway could be heard. At first, he frowned. Then his eyes widened. Then his hand began to shake. Mason Pierce, his father, had left Nora a portion of ownership in Magnolia House, along with legal management rights over the greenhouse and the profits from the activities she had built there. It was not a pity gift. It was not a paperwork mistake. It was a decision with a signature, witnesses, and a clear reason. Adam looked up. "Mom, did you know about this?" Evelyn did not answer right away. That silence answered for her. Nora looked at her. "You called me a gold digger for years, while you knew exactly who was holding something that did not belong to them." Evelyn shot to her feet. "You do not deserve the Pierce name." Nora answered very quietly. "I never needed that name to have value." Lila cut in, her voice high and rushed. "You are trying to steal our house. That is what you always wanted." Nora took out the final set of papers. "No, Lila. I only want to know why the Sapphire brooch was taken to a pawn shop in Charleston a few days before the dinner." The air went dead. Adam turned to his daughter. "What?" Nora placed a copy of the valuation appointment slip on the table. Beneath it was a printed security camera image, blurred but clear enough. A young woman wearing sunglasses, with a small tattoo on her wrist, was handing a blue velvet box to the shop clerk. Lila stepped back. "That is not me." Nora did not raise her voice. "The tattoo is yours. The signature is yours. And the time on the document is before the night you said I took the brooch." Adam looked at his daughter as if he were seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face for the first time. There was pain in his eyes, but beneath it was something else, fear. Because if Lila had lied about this, then how many other lies had he chosen to believe? Nora continued. "The brooch was not the only thing that disappeared. 6 antique pieces on the property inventory were replaced with replicas. Part of the greenhouse renovation money was also transferred into Evelyn's personal account, under the label of preservation expenses." Evelyn breathed hard. "Be careful with your words." Nora looked straight at her. "No. For the first time in this house, I will not be careful just so someone else can stay comfortable." Adam sat down as if all the strength had been pulled out of him. Lila began to cry. But this time her tears no longer made the room lean toward her. They only echoed, hollow and empty. Nora gathered her bag. "My lawyer will send a request for an audit of Magnolia House. I do not need to take everything. I only want what belongs to me, and I want to leave this marriage cleanly." Adam looked up, his eyes red. "Is this your revenge?" Nora looked at him for a long time. "No, Adam. Best revenge stories may need shouting, tears, and collapse. I only need the truth to stand where it belongs." She walked out of the dining room. No one stopped her. Outside on the porch, the afternoon sunlight fell across the glass panels of the greenhouse behind the house, the place where she had once replanted every pot with her calloused hands. Magnolia House still stood there, old and silent. But this time, the silence no longer belonged to the people hiding hidden family truths. It belonged to Nora. And it sounded like power. 1 month after Nora left the dining room of Magnolia House, the Pierce family no longer looked like the perfect picture they had once hung in front of the entire city. The windows still glowed, the sign still hung outside the gate, the gardenias still bloomed along the walkway. But inside that house, every lie had begun to rot like damp wood after a long, rainy season. The audit did not create a loud explosion. It arrived through letters, phone calls, and files placed on a lawyer's desk. Every antique that had been replaced, every amount of money that had been moved to the wrong place, every signature Lila had left behind in places she once thought no one would ever check. The truth did not scream. It simply walked in, pulled out a chair, sat down, and forced everyone to look straight at it. Evelyn lost her authority over Magnolia House. The woman who had once used family history like a crown now had to sit in the living room and listen as lawyers explained why status could not cover forged papers. She did not apologize to Nora. A toxic mother-in-law like Evelyn did not admit fault easily. But from that day on, she no longer called Nora a gold digger. Lila sold the white car she had once shown off online. Her accounts were frozen by Adam. The people who had once left comments defending her began deleting posts, changing their tone, or falling silent. The Reddit family drama story in which she thought she was the victim finally became a mirror reflecting her own selfishness. Adam changed the most. He temporarily stepped away from running the inn. Every morning, he sat alone in Mason's old office, reading the letters his father had left behind. There were things Mason had never said while he was alive, but now they struck Adam harder than any accusation. Mason had seen Nora. Adam had not. Nora did not celebrate. She did not open wine. She did not post anything to expose them. She did not retell every detail to earn pity from strangers. On the evening the first audit results were sent, she sat in the small pottery studio behind June's bakery, her hands covered in clay, trying to shape a bowl. It was crooked. The rim was uneven. The sides did not match. Nora looked at it for a long time, then laughed. It was not beautiful, but it was real. And after years of living in a house that only knew how to polish its surface, she found truth more comforting than perfection. A few days later, Lila sent an email. This time, there was no mockery, no performance. No sentences written for other people to read. She said she had been afraid Nora would replace her mother, afraid Adam would love Nora more than he loved her, afraid the house she had grown up in would no longer revolve around her pain. She apologized for lying, apologized for the brooch, apologized for turning Nora into the villain so she could be pitied. Nora read the email twice. She did not cry. She did not feel happy either. She only felt tired, like someone who had finally set down a bag she had carried for too long. She replied briefly, "I do not hate you. But pain does not give you the right to hurt other people. Learn that before you lose more than a house." 1 week later, Adam met Nora in the greenhouse. That place still belonged to her, exactly as Mason's will had stated. Sunlight fell through the glass roof and rested quietly on the pots of newly turned soil. Adam looked thinner. His eyes were red, his voice rough. He said he was sorry. Sorry for believing Lila before listening to Nora. Sorry for letting Evelyn turn his silence into a weapon. Sorry that he had needed papers, a will, and evidence before he could believe the wife who had stood beside him for years. Nora looked at him. For one moment, she could still see the man she had once loved. But love was not a key that could reopen every door that had been locked from the inside. She said, "I did love you, but I cannot go back to a man who only believes me when the truth has a lawyer's signature." Adam lowered his head. This time, he did not argue. Maybe that was the first decent thing he had done for her in a very long time. 3 months later, Nora's greenhouse opened every Saturday morning. It was no longer a place for the Pierce family to show off to guests, but a warm room for women learning how to stand again after betrayal, divorce, toxic family relationships, and years of being overlooked. They came to drink tea, shape clay, listen to a volunteer lawyer explain paperwork, and tell the stories they had once only dared to swallow. Someone said it was one of the most beautiful karma revenge stories they had ever heard, but Nora did not think so. To her, revenge was not the ending. Peace was the ending. One late spring afternoon, Lila appeared at the greenhouse door. She was not wearing heavy makeup. She was not holding her phone. She was not crying. She only asked if she could help arrange the chairs. Nora looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Start by listening." Lila nodded. And for the first time, she was truly silent. As the sun lowered behind the glass roof, Nora stood in the middle of a room filled with soft laughter and the smell of hot tea. She was no longer the woman who had been thrown out of Magnolia House in the rain. She no longer needed the Pierce family to recognize her. She had realized that real power was not about keeping a house, a name, or a dead marriage. Real power was knowing when to walk away and still keeping your heart soft. If you were Nora, would you choose to forgive, walk away, or come back to make them pay even more? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, hit like if this story touched you, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional family drama story content filled with betrayal, hidden truths, and endings that make you think.